Welcome back. We just have one more entry to go before we complete all the introductory concepts of my Iceberg. See, our final entry is where this VTM rabbit hole starts turning into a rabbit slide, if you get what I'm saying. You see, it's inevitable that both the living and the undead ask themselves the question, who was the first vampire? That's what this entry is all about. I'm of course referring to the Dark Mother and Dark Father, Caine and Lilith, Ave. Some believe that the story of these individuals have not only existed since the beginning of mankind, but that creation stories such as Genesis actually use the story of Caine and Lilith as its foundation. Some kindred claim to have seen and even possessed the ancient Neolithic fragments of carved stone and medieval parchment that supports the existence of the tragic tale of Caine and Lilith and the origins of vampirism. Attempts at documenting the origins and history of vampirism have been made throughout all of history. The most prolific attempts at documenting the story of Caine and Lilith come in the form of two books. The first book can essentially be considered Caine's account of his events, and that is the Book of Nod. The other book essentially tells the story of Lilith and is known as the Revelations of the Dark Mother. I set up, the only reason why I went on camera was to show you that I have those books, and I have like a whole stack of Vampire the Masquerade source books, and I need to get a life. A deeper breakdown of both of those texts will have to be saved for another time. I'll be using both of these books as the basis for this entry. I'll also mark on screen which book as well as which chapter of said book I'm summarizing. Right. So our tale of Caine and Lilith begins with the Revelations of the Dark Mother, and it goes something like this. In the beginning, there was only silence and stillness, the time of nothing, remembered only by the primordial being known as the Ancient One, who slept among the silence and stillness. Every 55,555 years, the Ancient One's eyes would open, and he would gaze upon the nothingness. Simply put, 55,555 is generally considered a really good number that represents angels and the universe and positivity and stuff. At least according to numerologists and occultists and Google, but I digress. This cycle of resting and awakening every 55 blah 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 years would repeat 333 times. On the 333rd time, the Ancient One opened its eyes, light came billowing forth, and the darkness was split. From this light came a being remembered as Jehovah. Yes, that Jehovah. Alongside other beings remembered as the Shining Ones. These beings sang great songs in reverence of the Ancient One, and their songs of creation began to weave the world into being. Those creatures that existed in the darkness before the Ancient One's light were driven away, howling and losing themselves into the vast wilderness of the new world. The Shining Ones would raise vast gardens that served as the pools of creation for all plants and beasts therein. They would place fire into the sky to form day and night, and their songs of divinity would become wind and air for the creations to blossom. Yet, it was Jehovah who raised the greatest garden of all the Shining Ones. At the center of his garden were two trees, two great trees, one of life and one of good and evil. Both bore fruits that carried the great truths of the Shining Ones and of creation itself. In time, the beasts of Jehovah's gardens, as well as Jehovah himself, would begin to grow content and carefree. The fruits of their labor granted them the satisfaction of knowing any and all things that could ever be. So this contentness would only last for so long. Indeed, Jehovah would grow hungry, yet nothing would fill his appetite, not even the fruits of creation themselves. Jehovah would venture to and feast at the gardens of the other Shining Ones, like Lucifer, Gabriel, Astarte, and Bess. Yet nothing would satisfy him, and for a time, he would remain in pain, until a great revelation came over him. Jehovah hungered not for the fruits of creation, but for companionship. This revelation of emotion and longing didn't exactly go so well for Jehovah, who began to weep rain and cry thunder. Yet this rain, blessed by intent and longing, seeped into the earth of both of Jehovah's great trees. From this, a strange and wondrous fruit was born. Two beings, male and female, rose from the mud, staggering and incapable. Two raw manifestations of creation and emotion. Jehovah passed his hands between the two and divided among them equal strength and capability, thus allowing them to stand from the rest of the beasts within the garden. Jehovah named the male Ish, or Adam, and the female Lilitu, or Lilith, and he bestowed upon them great gifts. Adam received the powers of shaping and naming, and Lilith received the powers of fertility and intuition. Adam named the plants and creatures of the garden, and Lilith brought together those very same creatures to breed and the plants to grow. As Lilith tended to the great trees, Jehovah warned her not to consume the fruits of creation, for they were only meant for the shining ones. If she consumed them, Jehovah warned Lilith, great harm would be caused to her. Despite this forbiddance, Lilith used her intuition to discern that Jehovah was lying, and chose to eat the fruits of creation against his will. Lilith's eyes were opened by the knowledge of good and evil and of creation. She understood her nakedness, yet wore the shame as pride. Despite understanding the nature of morality and creation, she did not understand how to use this knowledge to create as the Shining Ones did. Now that she knew how to make a garden, she wanted to create her own. Lilith would bring this knowledge to Adam, who cared not for the fruits of creation. So Lilith instead decided to watch and learn the ways of Adam for herself. She would create tools and weapons using all that she learned, much to the disgust of Adam, who grew to resent Lilith. This imbalance between these two once equal halves caused Adam to suffer and become a slave to his base instincts. In his loneliness and desire for Lilith, Adam began to lay with the beasts of the garden. Jehovah came upon this detestable act, shunned Adam, and told him to go to Lilith for that kind of companionship. So Adam marches up to Lilith, tells her what's up, and she plainly refuses, disgusted by Adam for getting it on with the beasts. Adam, however, isn't taking no for an answer. Seriously, this next part is going to get graphic, so you might want to skip ahead to the time on screen if you're sensitive to extreme topics. And as for the rest of you depraved freaks, let's get on with the story, shall we? So Lilith attempts to reason with Adam. She reminds him that both were made as equal, that she shouldn't have to lie beneath Adam on her back. Adam flies into a rage and pounces on Lilith, and a brawl between the two begins. When Lilith fought back, Adam struck her until both of their blood soaked throughout the garden. Adam, simply put, ultimately overpowers Lilith. The moment Adam spears Lilith with his manhood, she cries out Jehovah's true name in a moment of desperation, and Jehovah lifts her into the heavens. The wrathful Adam was left alone and unaware of the evil he had become. Keep in mind, he never consumed the fruits of creation and of good and evil. I know that was dark, but this is in-universe lore according to an in-universe book written by an in-universe crazy bitch named Rachel. Let's not forget the name of the Gabe's universe after all, the World of Darkness. Won't lie though, things don't get much better for Lilith from here. Though Lilith was lifted into the heavens, she was far from safe. Jehovah immediately demanded to know how Lilith came to know his true name, something that she would only know by consuming the fruits of the garden. Jehovah's voice boomed like thunder and was frigid like ice. Yet Lilith remained calm and claimed that the fruits she consumed had fallen naturally from the great trees, as she interpreted this sign as gifts from Jehovah himself, that she hoped to sit in the heavens alongside Jehovah as well. The storm calmed and Jehovah was still. Then, he was overjoyed with love for Lilith, and he took her as his mate. For 7 days and 7 nights they enjoyed each other's company, so to speak. All was well until Lilith acknowledged her equality to Jehovah. Literally, she says, "We are now as we should be, equal above all others." And Jehovah instantly goes, "Excuse me, bitch," and then flings her ass straight into the dust beyond the gardens, the land beyond the sight of the gods, alone and afraid. Purely out of jealousy or ego or something, I have no idea. Maybe a Shining One sleeping with Lilith is akin to Adam sleeping with the animals, and he got hit with a week's worth of god-tier post-nut clarity. Anyway, let's continue. For 7 days and nights did Lilith wander. Her skin was red, blistered, and cracked like mud. Her tongue was swollen, her bones jutted through her skin, and her feet were scorched as if by fire. Yet even more terrible, Lilith endured all of this while she was with child. Whether this was the child of Jehovah or Adam is widely debated. During this exile, Lilith pushed towards the far reaches of the land, towards a place remembered as the Endless Sea, passing other gardens along the way. She used her divine intuition and gifts from the fruits of creation to shape herself and the world around her to survive this godless wasteland. To her, the pain was wisdom. Far from the lands of Jehovah, Lilith discovered the Endless Sea and instantly threw herself within, seeking to the very bottom of the depths. There, she hunted and even laid with the creatures as Adam had, until she was fully recovered and sated. Soon, Lilith, to her amazement, realized she had begun to develop her own garden among the depths. Even to this night, Lilith is still remembered as the mother of the sea. So in time, as Lilith is out here growing sea monsters, Lilith would divest herself of the seed of Adam or Jehovah and supplant it among the creatures of the sea. In other words, the spawn of Jehovah or Adam's seed within her would be birthed not through Lilith, but through her garden of the sea. As if my explanation somehow makes that make any more sense. In time, Lilith would rise from the sea. Her skin was like amber and her hair was black as pitch. Her eyes were like the surface of the ocean. While she had helped to naturally develop a garden among the sea, she had yet to create a brilliant garden as the Shining Ones had. Even worse, she had developed a taste for the fruits of creation and was craving more. So she leaves the sea and pushes back into the godless wastes once again, determined to find more of Jehovah's fruits of creation. Lilith would come across the gardens of Bes, the vineyards of Dionysus, no shit, and the fields of Baal. These Shining Ones celebrated Lilith's beauty and prowess, for she was a being born of the earth, yet she possessed the, at least knowledge, gift, attunement to the Shining Ones. Though much to the indifference of Lilith, who would only be satiated by the fruits she sought. As Lilith approached the gates of Eden, she was stopped from entering by one of Jehovah's brothers, Lucifer, the Lightbringer. In his hands, a flaming sword grafted from the earth of Eden itself, which would act as a bane to both Adam and Lilith. As Lucifer guarded Eden's gates, he spotted a woman approaching from afar and came to her with the speed of a lightning bolt. Before striking this beautiful woman down, Lucifer asked her if she was Lilith, the ill-begotten creation who was driven from the garden. The woman denied it, and instead claimed that she was one of the Shining Ones like Lucifer and Jehovah, and she sought the wisdom of the fruits of creation. Lucifer looked into the woman's heart and saw that she spoke truthfully, and allowed the woman to pass the gates into Eden. Before the woman could enter, Lucifer, overwhelmed by her beauty and power, offers a gift to the woman and wraps her in a garment sewn of the night and the moon and the stars, and proclaims his love for her. Ra doesn't even know this woman's name. Luckily for Lucifer, the woman was so impressed by the gift that she fell in love on the spot. This woman, of course, though she pretends not to be, it's definitely Lilith. Lilith, after immediately falling in love with Lucifer, ultimately chooses not to trouble Jehovah, but instead believes that the tapestry of night that was given to her by Lucifer would be enough to grow her own garden. So she turns away from Eden, spreads her cloak of night, and flies off into the night sky. Lilith found a rich and fertile land bordered by 3 rivers. She blankets her cloak of night over it and attempts to sow a garden for herself. She even uses her own blood to sow the seeds for her crop, yet to absolutely no avail, much to Lilith's devastation. She simply needed the fruits of creation to fulfill her purpose. Stricken with rage, Lilith left her incomplete garden behind and set off for Eden once again. Meanwhile, Adam finds himself alone and miserable without Lilith. After a time, Adam cursed his creator, who was quick to put Adam in check. Jehovah claimed that Lilith was full of evil spirits and that she would have harmed Adam. She's full of the evil spirits of Jehovah and Adam. So Jehovah sculpts a new woman from the earth for Adam, and he bears witness to this event of creation. He sees the woman's bowels, innards, fluid, bone and skin, all of it during the creation process of his new girl. And this leaves Adam absolutely disgusted. He had no problem smashing animals, but seeing a woman being created from bone to skin, she belonged to the streets. So Jehovah, using a great gust of wind, just casts away the second human to have ever existed ever, literally just blew her to pieces, and the rest of his creatures devoured her, and I'm not even kidding, the passage ends with, when she was annihilated, Adam was content. Jehovah then knocks Adam out, yoinks a rib out of him, and a new woman was created from it, which Adam named Isha, or Eve. Adam quickly adopted the idea that Eve, a product of Adam, was lesser to him, and therefore she belonged to Adam, much to his satisfaction. One day, as Eve tended to the fruits of the garden, a great serpent came to her and tempted Eve into consuming the fruit. This serpent, of course, was none other than Lilith herself. See, Lucifer stood little in the way of his lover Lilith when she returned to the gates of Eden. So Lilith slips inside the Garden of Eden and takes the form of a serpent that was able to blend in well to its surroundings in order to avoid detection. Lilith witnessed Eve's existence as a lesser being to Adam and took pity upon her. She believed that the fruit would free Eve from her suffering. After the serpent form of Lilith convinces Eve to consume the fruit of creation, a bittersweet moment occurs where Lilith embraces Eve in hopes of comforting her during the absolute horror of gaining sentience and realizing you're an object to be used. Eve's weeping quickly caught the attention of Adam, who rushed to his lover's aid. By the time Adam reached Eve, Lilith had already consumed an insane amount of fruits of creation, basically the entire harvest, all except one, and fled. Eve, still weeping, plucked this last fruit from the tree, gave it to Adam, and let Adam become aware of the monster that he truly became. On this day, Adam, Eve, Lilith, and Lucifer would be cursed for all eternity by an angry, heartbroken Jehovah. Adam, now aware of all of his transgressions, could do little more than howl and scream in regretful anguish. Jehovah came forth with a rage so mighty and furious that his voice washed away the entire garden into little more than dust. Lucifer flew forth, but was violently slapped out of the sky by this torrent of rage. His sword broke into two halves that fell at both him and Lilith's feet, who had run to Lucifer's aid in her true form. Jehovah curses Eve to forever suffer the burden and pain of plucked fruits, and basically that curse manifests into the form of periods. Jehovah then curses Adam to forever suffer the burden of the big horny, and that basically means he will forever bow to the beauty of women and their allure. Stay focused, gentlemen, we gotta get this money. Jehovah then faces Lucifer and Lilith, and is extra mad at them for effectively corrupting his creations. Lucifer is cursed with blindness and a severe lack of trust in all things. He becomes a vessel of compassionless wrath. Lucifer would forever wield the sword, and his comfort shall be only the kiss of worms. Lilith is cursed with immortality, to never know the rest of death. She was also cursed to never love or be loved, and her womb would overflow with creations that would also be incapable of loving her. Finally, Jehovah cursed Lucifer and Lilith with the duty to strike down the creations of Adam and Eve as agents of death. Then, Jehovah cursed himself with jealousy and exile, so that he would never make the mistake of showing love to his creations ever again. So, obviously there's a great deal of symbolism going on with the curses being cast upon man, woman, and sun and moon. Ideas of masculinity, femininity, rationality, emotionality, life, death, time. We'll have to unpack these concepts in greater detail at another time, but understand that there is a sort of rhyme and reason to everything that we just talked about up to this point. It is a creation myth after all. Anyway, I digress. Jehovah called upon his fellow Shining Ones like Dionysus, Baal, Astarte, Bel, Ra, and Ta? Oh Jesus, I don't know. And all the other Shining Ones, and they all assembled within the ruins of Eden. Jehovah explained the events that had transpired, and a whole argument broke out between himself and the Shining Ones. Some blamed Jehovah and others Lilith. Some blamed Lucifer and others Adam and Eve themselves. This argument manifested into a brutal maelstrom, as if nature and the world itself was cascading and tearing away at itself. During this violent storm, Adam shielded Eve by putting himself in the way of the roiling earth, fire, air, and water, thus saving Eve. When the wild beasts came to tear apart the two, Eve was able to soothe the beasts, thus saving Adam. The Shining Ones witnessed this salvation between the two, called it love, and decided no punishment would come to them beyond their exile from the Garden of Eden. The Shining Ones then returned to their gardens after declaring that justice had been done. Lucifer and Lilith would flee into the godless lands once again until they reached the endless sea, far from anybody else, so that they may create their own garden. Adam and Eve embraced each other and went forth into the land of Nod, holding each other all the while. Jehovah stayed behind, called upon an angel to watch over the remains of his once proud garden, and left everyone and everything behind to become a deeply hurt, wandering god. He would only weep one final time before leaving the ruins of Eden behind. The next series of events is told through the eyes of Caine, and by that I mean the Book of Nod. By this point, a great deal of time had passed since Adam and Eve's exile from Eden. So much time has passed that the two had children of their own, 2 sons, the first named Cain and the second Abel. Cain was taught to plant seeds in the earth, to tend them and to watch them grow. Abel tended to the animals, aided in their bloody births, fed them, and watched them grow. The two loved each other, and Cain especially had a great deal of love for his little bro, and all was good. One day, a figure called the Father came to the brothers and demanded sacrifice to the one above. The figure referred to as the Father is widely accepted to be Adam, although it's important to note that the story of Genesis itself claims that it was God who demanded a sacrifice of the first part of their joy, but we'll save the grand religious comparisons for another time. You may already be able to guess the series of events that are about to transpire, although keep in mind this is an alternate account told through the eyes of Cain himself, so let's see what happens. Cain gathers his brightest fruits and his sweetest grass, and Abel slaughters his youngest, strongest, and sweetest animals. The two brothers cast their sacrifice onto a burning pyre, and the smoke carried their gifts to the one above. Abel's sacrifice smelled sweet to the one above and was blessed by his offering. Cain, however, was struck from beyond by harsh words and a curse. His sacrifice was unworthy. This denial seriously messed up Cain, who cried and prayed every night and day to make sense of his unworthiness. When the time for sacrifice came again, Cain didn't bother bringing another basket of fruit for the one above. Instead, the first child of man grabbed his tools and struck down all that was the first part of his joy, his own brother Abel. The most genuine type of sacrifice, at least through the eyes of Cain. The father then rushes to the scene, witnesses what is happening, and proclaims Cain as being cursed. Cain is then cast out into the godless lands referred to as Nod, alone and afraid. Cain wandered among the cold, brutal darkness for a time. Unlike Lilith, who had to sustain herself by drinking her own blood, Cain was just a dude. But Cain was exiled and wasn't exactly allowed to die. I mean, imagine pissing off God so bad he refuses to let you die. I mean, my God. Anyway, Cain would continue to suffer for a time, until a voice called to him from the godless darkness of the land of Nod. He looks up, and to his shock, a woman approaches, and she introduces herself as Lilith. Right, so swapping back to the revelations of the Dark Mother, aka Lilith's perspective, Lilith could see Adam's features and Eve's pallor amongst Cain's face, which stirred a deep hatred for the man before her. Yet Lilith could also sense the pain that was wrought upon Cain. The pain that was wrought upon Cain, I did not mean for that to rhyme, but the wrath of the one above. She could also sense a different kind of dark aura from within Cain, which she would identify as murder, the ability to kill without purpose, something Lilith found alluring to say the least. So she welcomes Cain to her garden with open arms. She clothes him, feeds him, and comforts him. The Book of Nod, aka Cain's account, also supports this. Little side note, by the way, Lucifer is still around, but bro is working the day shift. Wait, no, actually, bro is literally the day shift, and Lilith is the night shift. So Lilith took Cain in as if he was her own child, yet she pitied Cain in his weakness. Lilith never had trouble facing her judgments by the Shining Ones. She was equal to their level, a Shining One who ruled the night. Then there's Caine, this lesser mortal offspring of Adam and Eve that possessed the power of death, but not the courage or certainty to use it. Lilith hated Caine's weakness, and she would use some damn tough love in order to build up Caine to what she believed would be his full potential. See, something I never brought full attention to up to this point. To put it simply, Lilith and her followers love to suffer, at least according to revelations of the Dark Mother. I'm not even kidding. Followers of Lilith love dragging their face through glass and branding their flesh, because to them, suffering is what defines existence, and Lilith is their greatest proof of that. During Lilith's journey, she's physically abused, her skin is basically radioactively peeled off of her cracked bones, and she's carrying hundreds, if not thousands, of babies that were forcefully put into her by God and or Adam. She drowned herself to the point of forgetting the need to breathe after slipping into the endless sea. She violently births a bunch of sea monsters, and then she uses her blood to water the gardens and sustain herself, and the suffering just keeps going on and on and on. Despite all of this, I'm not even exaggerating, Lilith would not have wanted you to feel bad for her. All of that suffering she endured, to her, was simply part of the process. So why do I bring this up now? Well, as I mentioned earlier, Lilith hated Caine's weakness. So, she brings Caine to her garden, anoints Caine with her blood, warps her garden into a bed of literal nightmares, tells Caine he deserves this, and then just flings Caine straight into it. Just flung my boy straight into Silent Hill so that his suffering, and therefore evolution, may begin. For many days and nights, Lilith terrorized Caine within her garden, laughing and lashing him with burning brands and rending thorns until Caine's skin was entirely scarred. In time, Caine learned to outmaneuver and hide from the strangling vines and wild beasts of Lilith's garden. In time, Caine's fear and suffering would be replaced with indifference. Eventually, Caine stood battered and bleeding among the garden, though without fear in his heart, his blood being absorbed into the garden. Then, after so much suffering, he fell into a trance and collapsed to the ground. Lilith realizes she can't wake him up and just leaves him there and then goes back to her house. Just leaves him there. Funny enough, in Caine's interpretation of these events, a la the Book of Nod, he is completely taken aback and impressed by Lilith's garden. Caine then asks to be taught the ways of creation so that he may protect and provide for himself. At first, Lilith was hesitant to agree, but ultimately submits, cuts herself and bleeds into a bowl, then makes Caine drink from it. Then Caine falls into this slumber. According to both Lilith and Caine, during Caine's slumber, he is visited by the Archangel Michael, who begs that Caine repent for the murder of Abel. Caine refuses to repent, instead choosing to shield himself in pride. Lilith essentially takes credit for this, claiming her garden strengthened Caine's will. As punishment, Archangel Michael casts a curse upon Caine, causing an intense fear of fire and sensitivity to Archangel Michael's living flames. Simply put, a weakness and aversion to fire. Then another angel visits Caine, the Dawn Angel, Raphael, who bids Caine repent. Caine, once again, refuses and is granted another curse. Should Caine witness Raphael's dawn rays of the sun, his skin would be scorched and he would be driven away from it always. Simply put, a fear of sunlight in the daytime. Then came Uriel, the angel of death, or Ariel. Then came Uriel. I don't know. Then came Uriel, the angel of death, who offers mercy should Caine repent. Of course, Caine refuses, so Caine is cursed with undeath. He would never die nor starve, and be satiated only by blood and ash. He would be cast into the darkness forever out of God's sight until the end of days. This terrible curse actually causes Caine to attempt to try and take his own life. Yet as he tore away at his flesh, he is forced to stop and drink his own blood, fully embraced by Uriel's curse. Finally, Archangel Gabriel, Lord of Mercy, came to Caine. Yet, unlike the other angels, Gabriel already accepted Caine's decision, and instead of asking him to repent, offers Caine one final option. Should he ever choose to repent, Golconda, the Road of Mercy, will be there for him. Then, Caine's slumber was lifted from him, and he awoke a completely changed being thanks to Lilith's divine blood, the curses beset upon him, and the corrupting power of murder and death. Caine rose not as a man, but a creature we would forever remember as the vampire, first of his kind. Caine gained several supernatural traits that we remember as disciplines, which are still possessed by kindred to this very night. He gained the discipline Celerity, which allowed Caine to move like lightning. Potence allowed Caine to borrow strength from the earth, and Fortitude allowed him to harden himself like stone. Pause. Lilith showed Caine how she hides herself from others with the discipline remembered as Obfuscate, and how she commands obedience from others using Dominate, and how she demands respect and allures others with presence. In time, Caine would further develop his abilities until he found a way to alter his form using Protean, to hold dominion over animals using Animalism, and to see beyond sight using Auspex. Lilith slowly grew to fear Caine's power, for he was slowly becoming a threat to Lilith's existence. Lilith would even go as far as to command Caine to stop overreaching his bounds. And because of her power, Caine heeded her, though deep within, the seed of rebellion began to grow. Caine would ultimately use his newfound powers to sever his bonds to Lilith. He then cloaks himself in shadow and flees her garden back to the land of Nod. Lilith would continue tending to her garden alongside Lucifer, and they would even have children of their own. Their garden, known as Dehainu, would eventually grow to rival Eden itself. But this story has no happy endings. Lilith's tale is far from over. A great deal of time would pass during Caine's return to exile. During his absence, Adam and Eve would go on to have their third child, Seth, who would become the progenitor to which all other mortals would descend from, hence the term, Child of Seth. After a great deal of time, Caine would return to the world of mortals, who recognized and even knew of Caine's tragic tale. Yet to Caine's surprise, the tribes of the children of Seth openly welcomed and even worshipped Caine. These children of Seth would bring Caine to a great city, the first city ever made by mankind. Caine made his presence known to the king of the first city, a man remembered by many names, from Enosh to Enoch and even Enesh. For now, I'll call him Enoch. Enoch was so impressed by Caine that he straight up just relinquishes his crown and title as king to Caine, to which Caine would gladly accept. Caine would rule over the first city of Enoch for a time, though he would grow lonely in his power. The children of Seth had each other, yet Caine had nobody. It didn't help that pretty much everybody, including the former King Enoch, had been begging to be granted some of Caine's power. So Caine spends some time dwelling on this loneliness, a loneliness which manifests to a point so volatile that Archangel Uriel, the angel of death who gave Caine his curse of bloodthirst and deathlessness, manifests and approaches Caine. Simply put, Uriel tells Caine that should Caine produce any offspring, those children would inherit the dark mark and curses of their father, and therefore carry their father's seed of jealousy, doomed to plot and forever fight amongst themselves. Uriel then warns Caine not to embrace any of the children of Seth and grandchildren of Adam, who still walk the path of righteousness. So lonely Caine dwells on Uriel's words, looks down at the former King Enoch, seizes the man, and embraces him. Just as Lilith used her gardens to strip Caine of his blood and weakness, Caine stripped Enoch of his mortal blood by drinking it from his skin. Just as Lilith fed her own blood to grant Caine her strength, Caine fed his own blood to Enoch and granted him his own strength, and the first embrace was completed. The first city was named after Enoch in celebration of this monumental event, though Uriel's warnings against this still lingered in the back of Caine's mind. Side note, like everything in this story, the first city is also remembered by many names, such as Enesh and Enosh. Basically, the first city was named after Caine's first embrace, so we'll also call it Enoch. While there was peace for a time, it was all too inevitable that Enoch would also grow lonely as Caine had. Keep in mind that Caine was the only one aware of how to perform the embrace. Caine would ultimately indulge Enoch, embracing more children of Seth into the second generation of vampires. Soon there was Zilla, Caine's beloved wife, and Irad, whose strength served Caine's arm. Interestingly enough, the Book of Nod actually has a fragment within it known as Zilla's Tale, which is an Iceberg entry that appears up here in Tier 1. Actually, most of what I've been telling you up to this point have been Tier 1 Iceberg entries, but I'm trying to communicate this Iceberg in a way that does a good job of knocking out several entries at once. Anyway, let's take a moment to discuss Zilla's Tale. So one night, at a time after Enoch had been established, Caine came across a beautiful woman named Zilla, who he fell madly in love with. Not even vampirism could destroy the curse of the Big Horny. My boy Caine brought Zilla all sorts of gifts: sacrifices, perfumes, doves, dancers, singers, oxen, sculptures, beautiful clothes, the usual shit that you bring a woman. And she was either too scared or otherwise too disinterested to share Caine's feelings. So one night, Caine is wandering around frustrated, pulling at his beard and wondering just how the hell he's supposed to make this girl Zilla fall in love with him. As Caine paces, he comes across a strange woman remembered as the Crone, who is mournfully wailing at the moon above her. Caine approaches and asks why she's barking at the moon above her, and the Crone tells him it's because she yearns for something she doesn't have. Caine relates to her pain and asks, "What can one do?" The Crone smiled and told Caine to drink her blood, then to return the following night. The Crone would tell Caine the wisdom he sought to make Zilla fall in love with him. Caine, blinded by the Big Horny, obliged, fed from the Crone, and then returned the following night. The Crone then tells Caine to drink from her once again, then to return the next night with a knife and a clay bowl. Caine returns on the third night with all the requested items in hand. The Crone takes the bowl, mixes it with a bunch of berries, herbs, and spices, and then tells Caine to drink from it, claiming it would make him potent and irresistible and ardent and, snake oil. But Caine drinks it regardless, which causes the Crone to crack up with laughter. She had tricked Caine into forming a blood bond with her. Caine attempts to retaliate, but the damage was already done. Caine had become enthralled to his new regnant. Then the Crone makes Caine kiss her and turn her into a vampire. Terrifyingly enough, the Crone was cackling during the entirety of her embrace, for it did not cause her pain. Then the Crone revealed to Caine what was going on. She basically recited the Ghouls and Blood Bonds entry that I told you 300 hours ago. The idea that feeding from a vampire 3 times will incur a blood bond. And the Crone essentially tells Caine that he should do that to Zilla in order for him to claim her love. The Crone then dismisses Caine, telling him to return the following evening so that the Crone could feed him more of her blood and maintain their blood bond. Caine then returns to Enoch and uses his vitae to subjugate and secure Zilla's love forever. Caine then offers to marry Zilla, and she, of course, agrees. Just your typical love story. Caine's blood bond to the Crone persisted for a year and a day. During this time, the Crone would regularly harvest Caine's blood to be used in her elixirs and formulas. She would then force Caine to embrace even more children of Seth, only for them to be given to the Crone to never be heard from again. In time, Caine would begin to wisen up to the Crone's ways. The Crone eventually stopped feeding her vitae to Caine, who she believed would remain ever loyal. If this were any other being, the Crone would have been right to assume that the addiction to her blood would have eventually caused irreparable damage and total subservience. But this is Caine we're talking about. So one night, Caine approaches the Crone, claiming that he was having horrible dreams of Uriel's prophecy, dreams of his vampiric children lusting for Caine's powerful blood, much like the Crone does. Caine then asks for a way to protect himself from his own kind. The Crone, with her strangely infinite wisdom, walks up to a tree made of gopher wood, snaps off a branch, and tells Caine that should he plunge it into the heart of his wayward children, it will render them still and his to command. Caine says dope, thanks, and then instantly jams it into the Crone's chest. The Crone starts cackling, blood begins pouring from her mouth, and hatred from her eyes. and then she falls still. Caine kisses her goodbye and leaves her for the sunrise. Anyway, there you go. That's how Caine met his beloved wife Zilla, through completely normal circumstances. The moral of the story is plain enough. It acts as a sort of origin story for vampiric traits such as the blood bond and the impalement of the heart. But when looking deeper, the crone herself is quite the strange figure within the lore of Vampire the Masquerade. I mean, this Iceberg has like 5 entries on her alone. Think about it. How does a non-vampire develop a blood bond with Caine? And just who the hell is she anyway, to have devoured vampires and enslaved Caine, the first vampire? Also, Zilla's tale is the only fragment within the Book of Nod to describe Caine's appearance, specifically by describing him as tugging on his beard with frustration prior to meeting the crone. All in all, not even the vampires who compiled the Book of Nod paid too much mind to Zilla's tale. Let's circle back to where we left off prior to Zilla's tale. So, Caine is ruling over the first city of Enoch alongside his 3 progeny of the second generation: Enoch the Wise, Zilla the Beautiful, and Irad the Strong. Much to the dismay of Caine, his 3 consanguineous children learned of the embrace and began to create vampires 3 generations removed from Caine himself, his grandchilder. One night, Caine made a proclamation: no more embraces. Too many children of Caine meant a great loss of both blood and control. Caine's children listened, if only for a time. The first city would grow into that of a mighty empire, though one laden with corruption. The children of Caine indulged in their sin, constantly fighting among each other and abusing the children of Seth. Caine could feel the sky darkening, yet he said nothing of its forebodings. Caine knew that Uriel's prophecy was about to come true. The great deluge flooded the world and washed it clean of sin. The first city was destroyed, the children of Seth with it. Of course, Caine and his progeny survived. Caine fell into a deep despair and went into solitude, leaving his progeny to fend for themselves. At this point in the story, the perspective shifts away from Caine and instead to the perspective of his second-generation offspring. So this means this would be either Enoch, Irad, Zilla, or some other unknown second-generation vampire. The children of Caine, after much searching, found the Dark Father deep within the earth, who quickly cast away his children, not wanting anything to do with them. At this point, Caine had lost everything. The flood was a punishment for subverting the ways of righteousness. All Caine wanted to do was to remain deep in the earth so that he may never lose nor harm anybody ever again. So the children of Caine set off on their own, eventually discovering the children of Noah, and claiming dominion and rule over them. The vampires of the second generation created a brood of vampires in glory of Caine. These vampires of the third generation would be remembered as the Antediluvians, and they would go on to serve as the basis for each of the vampiric bloodlines that exist up to this very night, at least if you believe in all this stuff. Keep in mind that the true names of the Antediluvians are all virtually unknown, so I'll refer to each of them as they're referred to in these modern nights. While the kindred family tree is widely debated, the generally agreed upon bloodline looks something like this. Enoch the Wise would sire Ventru of the clan of Kings, Arakel of the clan of the Rose, and Malkav of the clan of the Moon, as well as Shoutout of the clan of the Healers. As of tonight, Ventru's bloodline exists as the influential Clan Ventru. Arakel's bloodline exists as the heartfelt Clan Toreador. Malkav's bloodline exists as the enlightened Clan Malkavian, and finally Shoulout's bloodline exists as the nigh-extinct solitary Clan Shoulout. Zilla the Beautiful would sire Absamiliard of the Clan of the Hidden, Set of the Clan of the Snake, and Hakim of the Clan of the Hunt. As of tonight, Absamiliard's bloodline exists as the disfigured Clan Nosferatu. Set's occult bloodline exists as the Ministry, and Hakim's bloodline exists as the ultra-lethal Clan Banu Hakim. Irad the Strong, just realized I wrote, in the script I wrote this as Irad the Storng. Irad the Storng would sire Bruja of the Clan of the Learned, La Sombra, Clan of the Night, Cappadocius of the Clan of Death, and some debate that Ventrue was actually embraced by Irad rather than Enoch, but we'll have to elaborate on that another time. As of tonight, Brujah's bloodline exists as the passionate clan Bruja, La Sombra's bloodline exists as the mystic clan La Sombra, and Cappadocius' bloodline existed once as clan Cappadocian, until Cappadocian was embraced by Augustus Giovanni, who usurped the clan into Clan Giovanni. As of tonight, Clan Giovanni has manifested into Clan Hecata. It's a whole thing. We'll get into it later. Then we got the weird ones, the antediluvians of Clan Shemitzi, Clan Ravnos, and Clan Gangrel. Their origins will be endlessly debated until the end of time. Everything I'm about to tell you is, of course, just one of many highly debated interpretations of events. So, it was once claimed that Irad the Strong used his supreme knowledge in vampirism to expunge himself of all evil. This evil manifested into a being remembered as the Eldest, who would serve as antediluvian to the clan of the Shapers. In these nights, the Eldest bloodline exists as the flesh-shaping dragons of Clan Shemitzi. Many names have been given to the creature known as the antediluvian of Clan Ravnos, whose origin has been enshrouded with lies, mystery, and secrecy. Some debate if the antediluvian of the clan is even a third-generation vampire at all. In these nights, the conspiratory vampires of Clan Ravnos have manifested into Clan Ravnos. Clan Gangrel's antediluvian is generally accepted to be a woman named Anoia, who many believe was a child of Lilith, specifically the baby that was forced into her by either Adam or God himself. Some even claim that the antediluvian of Clan Ravnos is actually a sibling to Anoia. So, Enoch, Irad, and Zilla each attempted to rule over each other as well as their brood of antediluvians. However, they did not possess the wisdom of Caine in order to properly maintain control, and Uriel's prophecy would once again come true. In time, the antediluvians of the third generation would overthrow and destroy Enoch, Irad, and Zilla during an event I refer to as the First Antediluvian War. Then the 13 antediluvians would raise a new city, the Second City, where they were worshipped as gods. In time, the antediluvians would embrace new progeny for themselves, vampires 4 generations removed from Caine. But the antediluvians were wise to the prophecy of Uriel, and a concept known as jihad was developed. Also, what's up, it's me in post-production with the terrible mic. Okay, anyways. Which is simply the endless struggle between younger and older generations of vampires, a concept similarly prophesied by Uriel. Whenever a 4th generation kindred embraced a vampire into the 5th generation, the antediluvians would destroy the child and sire in hopes of preventing an uprising from ever occurring again. Though Caine never physically returned, the antediluvians could always sense that they were being watched and judged by him through their blood. Caine was devastated at the loss of his 2nd generation progeny, and he cast forth a wrathful curse to each of the 3rd generation antediluvians, referred to as a clan bane. Malkav, the child of Enoch who defamed Caine's image, was doomed to insanity forever. To this very night, all vampires embraced in the clan Malkavian possess this derangement as their clan bane. Nosferatu, the child and murderer of Zilla, was cursed to forever wear his evil twisted visage for destroying someone so beautiful. Though, of course, this is just one of many origin stories. To this very night, all vampires embraced to Clan Nosferatu become violently disfigured by the embrace thanks to their clan bane. Before we discuss Brujah's curse, let's advance the story a bit. The Second City, ruled by the antediluvians, would grow old and slowly begin to crumble from both time and centuries of infighting among each other and other threats to the Second City. The jihad was in full effect as prophesied. This would all come to a head when Troil, or Troile, progeny of Brujah and grand progeny of Irad, diablerized Brujah and effectively inherited dominion over the future of Clan Brujah. As retribution, Caine cursed Troile and all of their lineage with an uncontrollable temper, forced to forever wear the face of rebellion. To this night, all vampires of Clan Brujah possess this emotional volatility. The other clans were all more or less uniquely cursed by Caine, though the Book of Nod only details what we just discussed. The diablerie of Brujah sparked what I refer to as the Second Antediluvian War, which saw the Antediluvians destroyed or otherwise forced to flee into hiding. The second city was abandoned, and the fourth generation of vampires, known as the Methuselah, spread across the earth to rule among themselves. The Antediluvians would remain in hiding. As is inevitable among both the mortal and immortal, the Methuselah of the fourth generation would go on to raise their own cities and wage their own wars among each other. Scores of mortals who thought they were fighting their own wars actually served the Methuselah and their secret holy wars held thanks to ancient grudges and vampire politics. The Methuselah Wars were so devastating that nearly all vampires of the fourth generation were destroyed by each other and even the children of Seth they ruled over, who began to cover the earth by the thousands, if not millions. Those few Methuselah that survived the Methuselah Wars hid their existence from each other and the humans that surrounded them, choosing to rule from the relative safety of the shadows, continuing their jihad and awaiting Gehenna. So, what is Gehenna? Well, some claim that a day will come called Gehenna. The world will turn cold and unclean things will boil from the ground. Great storms will roll, lightning will bring fire, and the living will fester and their bodies will fall. On this day, the Antediluvians will rise from their slumber, ancient and hungry, where they would consume their progeny and reclaim their blood. On the second day, Caine will return and call his children to the site of the first city, where he will await them upon a basalt throne. Here, Caine would judge each of his offspring. Some would be destroyed, others diablerized by Caine himself. Then, Lilith would bring herself to the Valley of Enoch. There, a battle between Caine and Lilith will ensue, causing the sky to tear asunder and the forces of hell to come bellowing out from below. On the third day, there will be nothing but silence. Crows feasting on carrion, plague dancing among the ruins. What antediluvians remain will raise an empire of blood, gather the mortals unlucky enough to have survived up to this point, and rule over them from the last city, called Gehenna. There, the last city would usher in a reign of terror and darkness. The dead would walk the earth, and the living would fill their coffins. Then, when the snows have consumed the earth and the sun had been snuffed out from the sky, a woman would be born, the last daughter of Eve. In her will be the decided fate of all living creatures. None know the identity of the last daughter of Eve, though she would only be identified by the mark of the moon upon her. She will face treachery, hatred, and pain, yet within her remains salvation from this horrible apocalypse. Simply put, Gehenna is the apocalyptic event in which Caine and his antediluvians, and even the crone, would awaken from their slumber, eat all vampires, enslave the living, and usher in an era of darkness. Those who believe in this vampiric Judgment Day-like event, such as the Sabbat, also believe that a series of signs and events will occur that are meant to herald Gehenna. The first and perhaps most prominent sign being the time of thin blood, where caitiffs and thin-blooded of the 14th generation and beyond, unable to perform the embrace, will outnumber true vampires. Other signs include lupines hunting vampires in greater numbers, and the return of elder vampires such as the crone. The moon would run red as blood, and the sun would rise black in the sky. I'm not trying to freak you out or anything, but if you're a Sabbat, or at least a Nodist who believes in everything we've discussed, then I'm happy to report that basically all the signs of Gehenna I just recited have already come true. So, don't think about it too much. Let's circle back to Caine and Lilith. Caine hates his children and may or may not be wandering the earth. The antediluvians and perhaps even Methuselah are asleep, but maintaining their jihad through the influence of their blood. Their offspring spread throughout the world and go on to have their own crazy stories that would culminate into the state of the world as it exists tonight. To the Sabbat, Gehenna is coming and its signs are actively present. To the Camarilla, Everything we just talked about is just mythical nonsense not worth lending credence to. If you want to take it a couple steps further, some, like myself, speculate that everything we discussed may or may not be laden with, how should I put it? Pro-Elder and or pro-Camarilla propaganda? But that's neither here nor there. Something that probably stuck out to you, however, if you were paying extra close attention, is the fact that Lilith and Caine would duel during Gehenna. This probably doesn't make sense. I mean, the worst thing Caine did to Lilith was abruptly leave her after becoming a vampire. And the worst thing Lilith did to Caine was, well, turn him into a vampire. The Book of Nod doesn't really acknowledge Lilith after Caine leaves her, so we'll have to turn towards the revelations of the Dark Mother to make sense of this feud between the Dark Mother and Dark Father. And what do we find? Well, let's just say I'm not surprised Caine left this out of his other stories. The following events seem to have occurred at some point after the creation of the antediluvians within the first city of Enoch, but before the deluge. At this point in time, Lilith was busy cultivating her garden within and along the Endless Sea, known as Dahainu. Indeed, after so many failed attempts, Lilith had finally cultivated a garden for her own. After a while, Dahainu would grow to rival even Eden itself, though of course at this point, Eden had been long since destroyed. The sons and daughters of Lilith and even Lucifer shone brightly amongst her garden, and all was good. Then, on a day black as ashes, while Lucifer was busy guiding the sky through this darkness, Caine appeared at the edge of Dahainu, his progeny swarming behind him like locusts. Caine and his children fell upon the children of Lilith and feasted upon their flesh like jackals and wolves. The antediluvians stole the fruits of Dahainu and cast fire upon the garden, burning it to embers until Dahainu was no more. Lilith was devastated by the loss of her children and of Dahainu, and she ushered a curse upon Caine and his children so severe that some believe Lilith is the reason that the antediluvians have a clan bane. Lilith wished salt upon the tongues of Bruja, Shemitzi, and Setite, who slaughtered Lilith and Lucifer's children like lambs. Lilith wished lamentations upon the tongues of Ventru, La Sombra, and Malkavian, for they poisoned the trees and the rivers. Lilith wished coals upon the tongues of Ravnos, Cappadocian, Salubri, and Gangrel, who devoured Lilith's children like beasts. She wished maggots upon the tongues of the Banu Hakim, most cursed of all, for stealing the secrets of Dahainu for themselves. Then Lilith curses and damns Caine 3 times over. She wishes Caine all manner of suffering, like 10 sentences worth of nothing but shade being cast upon Caine. She wishes that rot devours his loins, filth encrusts his eyes, that his teeth would fall out of his mouth. I mean, she's just spitting curse after curse after curse upon Caine. Only Nosferatu and Toreador were spared from all of these curses, for they veiled the faces of those they slain, and they showed mercy and solace to the young. Everyone else, to Lilith, was to be consumed with fire, broken like pottery, washed away like dust. According to Lilith, Caine and his brood laughed as they left the remains of Dahainu and returned to their city of slaves and walls. Lucifer cursed Caine and his children so that, should they ever enter the light of Lucifer, they would be utterly destroyed. At this point, Lilith was so blinded by her heartbreak, devastation, and hatred that she was pretty much incapable of love. At her request, Lucifer wrapped the bones of their children in palm leaves and scattered them far along the distant horizon. Lilith then wishes Lucifer goodbye, for she chose to remain within the domain of night, cursed to never love nor to never be loved ever again. Indeed, Lilith completely succumbed to her hatred and promised eternal revenge upon everyone and everything. Humans were the byproduct of a god who was beyond cruel to her, while Caine and his children took everything she ever wanted away from her. Just as Lilith's offspring were taken from her, she would wish the wombs of all to be barren in her wake. With her hatred, she would raise a new garden called Bahara, the Garden of Sorrows. Within Bahara, Lilith would begin to cultivate the spirits of death sorrow, hunger, anger, temptation, lust, serpents of hate, clouds of deception, tides of endless silence, all manner of demons in preparation for Gehenna, the return of Caine. Followers of Lilith, known as the Bahari, still believe that Lilith continues to cultivate her garden to this very night. Okay, there you have it. The tragic tale of the Dark Mother and Father, and at least a couple interpretations as to the origins of vampirism. There's honestly so much that we haven't even touched on within both books, but we'll have to save those mysteries for another time. But that concludes everything we will be discussing today. I don't have an outro yet. Y'all stay dangerous. Peace.